in 2012. I made the transition to full-time entrepreneurship basically because I had a realization that I don't have control over my career. I don't have control over my life. I feel trapped. And that's kind of when I said, I think I'm ready to take that leap from part-time entrepreneurship to full-time entrepreneurship. We had a podcast before that was a total flop. I really wasn't great at interviewing.
What did you do differently than others to get it to 130 million downloads and counting, where a lot of people will probably never hit the first million?
The Content Capitalist Podcast.
Hey, welcome to another episode of the Content Capitalist Podcast. Right now, I have with me actually a client we've been working with for the last few months. And I'm really excited because this is actually the first time I'm shooting a podcast, first of all, with an overseas guest. Thank you, Omar. And
Pleasure.
Secondly, with a live audience. I have my wife and Omar's wife, and they could let us know if we can use their names later on. Omar, welcome to the show.
It's great to be here, man. Thanks.
Thanks. Now, Omar, a lot of people come into our agency with different levels of experience, different levels of skill. And when you came in, it was quite unique because you had already been running a successful podcast for just under a decade. And then you reached that cusp right after joining. And then you wanted to go from audio to video on YouTube, which was a unique situation for us. I'd love for you to share with us, and I know it's a whole decade of stuff going on, but what was it you were doing up until that point in your business history and building up your podcast audience?
Sure. I'm going to start a little bit way back. My first career was an educator. I was a teacher. I was a high school and university teacher. I started as an English teacher. And I was side hustling, building businesses on the side for about a decade while I was teaching. So I basically could afford to make some big mistakes because I had a paycheck. But at the same time, I was learning about what kind of entrepreneur I wanted to be, what kind of businesses I liked, I didn't like, who I wanted to work with, all that kind of stuff. And I made the transition to full-time entrepreneurship in 2012, basically because I had a realization that I don't have control over my career. I don't have control over my life. I was in a position where I was the head of department at the university. I was acting chair. I was doing the job for 18 months, but they didn't give me the title and the salary and everything officially. So I went to the dean and I asked my supervisor, asked her, hey, what's going on here? You know, I'm doing a great job, right? Yeah, you're doing an amazing job. You're doing all this great stuff and initiatives and blah, blah, blah. So why haven't I got this promotion? And for a brief second, she kind of looked like she was going to bullshit me. But then she realized that like I was being earnest, and she was like, I'm sorry, but the director of the university wants to make an outside hire and they want somebody with a PhD and all this other stuff. Even though you're doing a great job, we're going to replace you with somebody and you're going to go back to your other position. And in that moment, I just always say that my frustration outgrew my fear. I said, anything's better than this. I feel trapped. And that's kind of when I said, I think I'm ready to take that leap from part-time entrepreneurship to full-time entrepreneurship. And I left the university. We moved to New York, Nicole and I at the time together. And from there, we had a business consulting firm, started some things. But in 2014, 2 years later after that transition, we started the podcast, The $100 MBA Show. Now, a lot of people don't know that that wasn't our first podcast. We had a podcast before that. That was a total flop. It was called People Who Know Their Shit. You can blur that out if you have to. But unfortunately, the podcast was shit. And it didn't really do very well.
So how do you define, like how long did it take you to realize this is shit and it's not going anywhere?
Yeah. And that's really tough in the beginning because it's like, maybe I need to grind it out. Maybe I need to work harder. Maybe I got to pivot, all that kind of stuff. But we did about 46 episodes. It was about, I would say, 8 months. The best episode we had was with Gary Vaynerchuk, and it got 400 downloads, which was like...
You got him on the show.
Yeah, it was like a video call.
And only got 400 downloads.
Exactly.
So I bet he wasn't helping from it at all.
No. I mean, at the time, he was like, this is 2014, and this is when he was doing anybody would reach out to him, he would do any kind of interview. And it was very kind of him, and it was a wonderful conversation. I got to know him a little bit, but I can get more hits on a blog post than that. And it was a lot of work, and it was funny because Nicole and I were still doing side gigs. Nicole was doing film work. She's a New York Film Academy graduate. And she was doing a film gig in New York, and we were living in San Diego at the time. And we did a road trip across country, and we're in the car just trying to figure out what's going on. Why does this podcast not work? And we just got honest with ourselves. We looked at the top business podcasts at the time. There were people like, Jordan Harbinger, who's been podcasting before the iPhone. There's Tim Ferriss that has like 4 New York Times bestsellers. There's like Pat Flynn that has all his beloved audience and he's been podcasting for longer. Like, get real, Omar. Like, why are you going to be better than them? And what I realize is that I'm not leveraging my strengths. Like, all these people have certain strengths and they're leveraging them in their podcast. I'm a teacher by trade. I have a master's in education. I've done 5 classes, 5 days a week for years, for a decade. Why am I not teaching on this podcast? I really wasn't great at interviewing, and I thought I need to start leveraging my strength. And that's kind of how we came up with this concept of the $100 MBA show, which is practical business lessons. So sort of like language lessons, but for business literacy. And that kind of really changed everything, really, is understanding that you have to use your unique strengths, your unique experiences to have any kind of chance of success.
I'm taking this in personally right now because I've got this podcast and it's not blowing up. It's okay. And I keep telling myself, just put in the reps. And the growth is, let's just say it's like using a ski analogy, a gentle slope, right? But every time I talk about tech and video and how to set up home studios, that stuff takes off. And the reason I keep pulling back is sometimes I feel like, wait, but that's not really directly related to what my clients want. But would you say this is an example of me maybe needing to lean into the stuff that I'm actually the best at versus interviewing experts? And I'm kind of saying this for myself, but also for anybody else who's listening who might have that same situation.
That's a really good question. I find that anytime I've struggled in my career as an entrepreneur, I've seen anybody struggle that I've helped, it's mostly a product problem, meaning that, and I learned this even with our software company, Webinar Ninja, like, you want a business that allows you to push the boulder down the hill, not up the hill. People are knocking down the doors to watch, to listen, to consume, to buy. And sometimes we make it hard on ourselves, and we should spend a little bit more time figuring out how can I make the product, meaning the podcast or whatever you're offering the world, so irresistible, so great, so easy for it to just gain momentum. And that saves you a lot more energy and time and effort. Sometimes just tweaking that a little bit makes all the difference. So I would lean into things that are just makes your life easier.
Yeah.
And often that really makes everything much better.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to ask you a few specific questions I prepared here about the show. So you've got 130 million downloads and counting for the podcast so far. And we just got to the part where you started it. What did you do differently than others to get it to 130 million, where a lot of people will probably never hit the first million?
That's a great question because I've been around the podcast game for a long time, over a decade. I've seen my contemporaries start and stop their podcasts. I've seen their contemporaries fizzle out. I've seen their contemporaries that were big deals 5 years ago, and today they're struggling to kind of keep it going. And I think the difference is what you alluded to earlier, like recently we moved to video. Like, it's very uncomfortable, but you have to constantly reinvent yourself. You have to constantly figure out a way to, how can I change, improve myself, the show, how I deliver it. I don't see it any different than being like a recording artist, like being like a Madonna or a Michael Jackson or whatever. Like, I'm nowhere near as talented as these people, of course, but they make an effort to say, this next album is going to be something that's going to just shock the world. It's going to be different. And it takes guts to say, hey, I know this worked and Thriller sold so many albums, but I'm going to change everything and come up with bad. Like, it's really hard to do that as a creator because you finally got something that's working. You don't want to mess around with it too much. But the problem is that the market changes, the audience changes, their taste and their likeness. Like, if we didn't move to video now, we're going to get left in the dust. As hard as it is for us to like transition to video, and I have a standing haircut now, and I got to make sure that I'm ready, camera ready. I have this, we worked on the studio together, all that kind of stuff. Like, it's a lot of work, and I can easily just be like, nah, I'm just going to stick to audio. So I would say that's kind of what we did through the last 10 years, is that we experimented with the actual content, with the types of episodes, with the format, with the quality of the edit, with the quality of the recording, scripting, not scripting, outlining. I've improved a lot as a person. I feel like, It's an investment for me to travel and to learn and to read and to grow and to take courses and go to conferences and meet people like yourself and Natasha and everybody. That's all kind of fuel to allow me to produce better work. A lot of people don't understand this. Like, it's very hard for you to actually create something great without you becoming great. Like, how is that great product gonna manifest? You have to absorb great stuff, improve your taste in that way, and then you'll be able to produce great work. And that takes time and effort, and just see that kind of long-term view. So, I mean, from a more tactical point of view, don't be afraid to experiment with your show, with your podcast, with your YouTube channel, whatever it is. You want to be as close as possible to your audience to learn what works and what doesn't. Even just chatting with people, getting on a Zoom call, surveys might even work, or just an email chat. Sometimes I just like to engage with some people on my email list and ask them to reply to an email, just so I can learn a little bit more about their struggles and where they're going and what their worries are. Right now, AI is a hot topic, and people are worried about that. So I think it just takes a lot of courage for you to feel like, hey, I gotta try different things, kick up a little dust, not be afraid to change things up as I go along.
All right. Appreciate that. Just before we started recording, you mentioned something about treating your podcast like a business and actually actively promoting it, which other people don't do. Could you share some of the tactics you use to actively promote that podcast?
Sure. I mean, I could share what we do today. I could share what we did in the beginning. At the start, Nicole and I didn't have a marketing budget. Like, we were really just skating by, trying to make it happen. I look back at it and I'm like, wow, I'm so glad I was innocent and naive, because if I knew it was going to be that hard, I probably would not have done it. But we just were hopeful that this was going to work. When we launched the podcast, I think a few months after it launched, Apple has this thing called New and Noteworthy. So you're on New and Noteworthy for 8 weeks. You get a lot of exposure on the front page of the business section. And if your podcast is doing well at the start. So we were like number one for like 5 weeks straight in New and Noteworthy.
So this has to be a newly launched podcast.
Exactly.
And it has to have certain KPIs that are
downloads,
secret or something.
And subscribers, whatever combo that Apple believes in. And after New and Noteworthy, most podcasts just fall off a cliff because they don't have that exposure anymore. And we were like really conscious of this because we had a lot of podcasting friends, and they were like, hey, this is great and all, but be careful, blah, blah. So we were just trying to find ways to grow the show beyond, the current audience. And this might sound ridiculous and crazy, but I'm telling you, as an exercise, it was so enriching. At the time we were living in San Diego, the beach and the boardwalk was like a 10-minute drive. We filled the esky with ice, went to the corner store, filled it with cans of soda, got our whiteboard off the board, and wrote "free cold drink for iTunes love." And we just wrote that on the whiteboard, and we just stood we have no permit, we have no right to be on the boardwalk, whatever, blah, blah, blah. We just stood there with the board, with the esky, with the cooler filled with
Please tell me you have a photo of this.
We do have a photo.
Oh, good.
Yeah. We use it for B-roll. So we have a photo of this, and basically people would walk by and say, what's this? First of all, this is 2014. So iTunes, and I think the statistics is like 1 in 4 people knew what a podcast was. So they're like, what's this? And I was like, oh, do you ever dream about starting a business? You're like, yeah, of course I have. Okay. We have like these daily business lessons that you can listen to. They're free, and they're on Apple Podcasts. What's a podcast? And we just chat with them like, hey, just choose a drink. I'll tell you about it. And they open it up, and they're enjoying their drink. And the law of reciprocity kicks in. We're just like, hey, give me your phone. I'll show you what it is. I open another podcast app, search it. Here it is. Give it a listen. If you like it, give us a review. And we did that all day. We probably spoke to like maybe 70, 80 people, gave away all the sodas we had. And we just had a fun time talking to people about our podcast. I think there's a really important lesson to be proud of what you've built. Yeah. Be comfortable with talking about what you do. Being able to explain it in simple terms to somebody who's never heard of it before. And then just be okay with we got 80 subscribers or maybe even less. But the point was that gave us that confidence, like, hey, we're actually helping people with our product. People are resonating with it. We learned about how they reacted, some of their questions. And we just did a bunch of small little things like that to start marketing with no money. One of the things we did when we launched the podcast is I got on a lot of podcasts as a guest. But I asked them, hey, I have one favorite ask. They're like, what? I need you to publish this episode on this day, which was the launch day of our podcast. So when we launched our podcast, I was also on other podcasts, like simultaneously, like 12 other podcasts. So
it looked like a coordinated campaign, right?
Yeah, like, who is this person? It's on all these podcasts, right?
Yeah.
So it just created this buzz, and that was totally free. I say free, but I invested the time and the energy with Nicole to go to these events, go to conferences, make connections. Hey, can I get on your podcast? Help them out prior. So when I need a favor, they're available. So that's kind of what we did in the start. Today, we invest time and money into the podcast. We definitely spent a lot of money. I think in the last year we spent over $120,000 just on podcast advertising. That's advertising our show on other podcasts. There's a way to do it affordably, which is basically be on X a lot and be on the lookout for up and coming creators that maybe have
some upward tick, right?
Yeah, they have a smaller audience, upward tick. They're an engaged audience. The one that I really resonated with was Jay Klaus, who's becoming a big star now, but we kind of sponsored his show and his channel and his newsletter early on. Arvid Kahl, who's in the tech space, we sponsored his newsletter, and you can just basically DM him. And a lot of these creators, they're not really approached that much because they don't have hundreds of thousands of followers, but maybe they have 50,000 people on their email list, and they're willing to cut a deal for 500, 600, a couple grand. And that can get the ball rolling and get you a like-minded audience.
Do you ever think about doing something live again, like you did with the, drinks for likes or podcast love? Like, for example, there are YouTubers now who set up these tents and it's like, ask me anything or convince me that it, or something, right? They put up a sign. And I'm just thinking, like, how cool would it be to bring back another version of this where you set up a tent or something and then it's a $100 MBA and it's just like free business advice. And then you just talk to people off the street about business. How cool would that be?
That would be cool.
And then you could do some episodes there, because I know up until now, or up until we started working together, it was purely audio and it wouldn't make so much sense. People wouldn't really get that, the experience. But if you could bring people on the street, so many people who have these dreams about starting a business one day and they just want to talk to somebody real who's done it. Yeah. That would be a visual
I'll get the permits this time.
So that could be fun. All right, I got a question here, and you already touched on the $120,000, which I was going to ask you. You talked about Webinar Ninja, and I listen to so many of your shows, and you talk about that a lot. And I love how you keep, using that as a callback as your anchor of like, hey, I actually did build a business, I actually did exit,
right?
And I love how you did that. Can you tell me how that played in with your with the podcast? Like, was it a distraction? Were they synergistic? Were they independent?
I always share with my audience that if I'm covering a lesson, a challenge, a difficulty, it was probably something I went through with Webinar Ninja a year or 6 months ago, because it takes that long to get over that kind of pain. Making, maybe a costly hire that didn't work out, or, not understanding where the market was going and betting on the wrong thing and all that kind of stuff. So it definitely gave me a lot of fuel in terms of content, because every day I'm solving problems. Like, I literally would wake up and the question that popped in my head every morning, get out of bed, what are the problems I have to solve today? And with tech and with software, it's like everything's a red alert. You can't have the software down. You gotta make sure customers are happy at all times. You gotta make sure your team is happy at all times, because it's highly competitive. It's a very small world, SaaS, and people poach people all the time, and you gotta make sure your team is satisfied. I would say it was like a crash course in becoming like as good as an entrepreneur I could be, a leader. And that's what the hard part about selling is that you have to be honest with yourself and realize, okay, I think with my skill set, with what I've done, this is as far as I can take this business. I need to pass the baton to somebody else for it to reach its full potential. Which is a very it's emotional, but at the same time, the easiest people we can fool are ourselves. Like, you could fool yourself, tell yourself anything, but sometimes you just have to break through that for your best interest and realize, okay, that's not what I need to do. But I invested a lot in my own personal brand. I was the face of Webinar Ninja. I did all the webinars, the sales webinars for the most part. We had some people that helped us as well. I did community webinars, member webinars. I did over 500 webinars in 10 years, mostly because I wanted to be close to the grain and understand my customers and be able to go to the tech stand-up and tell our developers, hey, we're getting some requests about this. Let's build this in the next 2 weeks in this next sprint, and blah, blah, blah. And I think that helped us a lot in terms of just understanding how to build a better product, how to deliver that product in a better way. At the end of the day, like I mentioned, usually most businesses are a product business. And then once we figured that out and created a better, superior product, it was easier to grow the business. And those pieces of knowledge, that experience really helped me have great content for the podcast, and share frankly. I think that's what really helped the show propel, is because we talked about real things like, should you hire a family member, right? What are some things you need to consider? What do you do when somebody like embezzles money? Like, these are real things that happen in real business that people don't want to talk about because it sounds like you're weak, sounds like you made a mistake, like you're a fool. But I was open enough to say, hey, I'm okay with failure as long as I learn. They say failure is feedback. And I think that allowed people to feel a little bit seen and a little bit feel like, okay, it's fine. I made a mistake. I can learn from this guy and move on.
Yeah, makes sense. And with the podcast and webinar niche going on, I love how you're saying how, like what's going on there. Yeah, a little bit of a delay to you. Get over the pain, right? And you put that out there. Are there things that you ever put out and you realize a little bit later, I shouldn't have put that out? Or is there like some kind of threshold where you realize, this is personal, or this is private, or this is business, strictly business? Or was it really just free flowing?
I wouldn't say personal or business. I would say that I probably have changed my mind on a few things over the last decade when it comes to business. One of the reasons why we have built our program, the Unreal MBA, from the ground up recently is because I don't really believe in the material that exists. So I want to kind of rebuild it, reshape it. And I'm probably going to have to do it again in a decade. But the point here is that I've become different. I've learned different lessons. I've changed my mind on a few things. The world has changed in a lot of ways. So, yeah, I would say there's some things I've changed my mind in terms of approach of business. That's one thing I would say. The other thing is, I think this is really hard to communicate because I think I was a little bit more too prescriptive to people and what they should do with the podcast in the early days. Like, this is the way you should do this, 1, 2, 3, 4. But the honest truth is that we don't know exactly their situation, their skill set, their market. Like, I don't know what the hand towels
You don't know
market
who's
is.
listening.
Right. And I also just don't know everybody's business and all the intricacies. And one of the things I learned the hard way is it's good to get coaches, it's good to get experts and consultants, but you need to make the decision at the end. Don't outsource decisions. And a lot of times in the beginning, you are looking for somebody to make a decision for you. You're looking for somebody to say it's okay to do this or do that and show you the way. But they don't know your business. They don't know you. They don't know what's important to you. They don't know what you're trying to build this for. They don't know your audience as well as you do. You know your business more than anybody else. And that's something I learned the hard way. And you take the information, by the end of the day, you need to make a decision what's best for you.
I found that to be true too, because as pure as the motives may be, somebody's giving a prescriptive content in any way, the stage of business that the listener is at is going to make all the difference on whether it's going to work or not, or even the vertical that they're in. And I made that mistake early on, which is listening to what Gary Vee was suggesting and realizing, no, this is what he's doing with a team of 29 full-time content creators and $400 million ARR, which at the time, I think that was like 10 years ago when I started listening to him. And then I realized, hey, none of this is working. And then, but what he was doing at the beginning was just getting in front of the camera.
Documenting, yeah.
2 or 3 times a week, talking about wine. That was it. I was like, okay, so that's how he started. And that would make more sense for somebody who's just starting. That's something he knew. He knew wine. He just needed, it was a simple system, flip cam, recording, no cuts, just upload. And when you look at it that way, then it makes more sense. And that's something that I've seen so many people mess up on, is even coming to me. There's like, hey, we want to get started and we want to do the strategy. And because they heard it from somebody on the stage or on a podcast, right? So you're right on the money about that. All the advice can be good, but it's really just not for everybody at every time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love it though when people state advice, not directly like do this, do that, but they say, this is what I did. Because then that always gives more context. And then people think, oh, what he did, and then in context to where he was.
I'm a lot more conscious of that these days, yeah.
Yeah, so then people could take it or leave it based on if that fits. I got a question here for you. Bootstrapping as a tech company.
Yeah.
You call yourself a non-technical founder. A lot of people, they're not even going to think about starting a SaaS or maybe even a podcast or a video because they're not good at video, they're not good at the tech or anything. Touch on that.
I built my SaaS pre-AI, so now there's really no excuse, right? Because you could literally ask ChatGPT anything, you could copy and paste the code and say, is this any good? Like I didn't have that at my disposal. So let me just be totally honest with the non-tech founder thing. Like I knew my way around HTML, a bit of PHP. I built some sites on WordPress, but it's very different from building an app with a back end and a front end and different technologies and streaming services and a whole different ball game. I didn't know about infrastructure and any of that stuff. But one of my favorite tools is reading biographies. And what I learned in reading a lot of different biographies is, one, building a business is really hard, and don't feel stupid if you make mistakes, because they all make mistakes, rite of passage. Two, you don't need to be an expert at everything. You just need to be able to find people that are good at what they do. So one of the first things we did early on in the first few years of Webinar Ninja was I went to Upwork. I filtered for like a high-end tech person who's maybe a CTO in a company that is looking to do something part-time, to consult, to help. And I just filtered for most expensive, basically. I just want somebody that can do the work in half the time and figure it out. And I just asked this person, hey, I have this little tech software thing going on. I need your help with hiring, vetting people. I need you to set up my infrastructure, and this person is in a boring, Fortune 500 company, is looking for an adventure, loves this idea of a startup, loves what you're doing, never had a chance to be their own entrepreneur. This is the first chance to kind of get into it. People don't realize that, like, a lot of highly technical people love being part of a startup because, they can build things. They haven't built things in a while. They're just sitting in board meetings. So that was a really big move on our side of like getting somebody who's really smart, just as a part-timer, to come and consult, to screen CVs, to interview for us, to set up our infrastructure, to kind of say, hey, this is the first hire you need to make, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, this is your budget. Maybe you don't need to make this hire right now. Wait until you're at this MRR. And through that, I learned as like a teacher to me, like how to build a software company. And then through that, we made some key hires. We made some bad hires too that cost us lots of money that were, just being ignorant. And sometimes people are just nice people. And
were you like just using your savings from your teaching salary to
Good question.
to fund all this?
So Webinar Ninja, we pre-sold Webinar Ninja at the start. It was
So you
kind of
understood marketing pretty well before even launching.
I love marketing. I love sales. My father was a salesman for a long period of time. I learned by watching him. I used to work my dad was a car salesman, and I used to work at the wash bay at the age 13, wash cars. And my job was from 9 in the morning to 3 p.m. But my dad went home at 9 p.m., so I had to wait for my ride home. So I would just go and sit in the showroom and watch my dad sell cars. And my dad is a non-native speaker of English, immigrated from Egypt to US, doesn't have the gift of gab, but was really good at asking questions and figuring out what's important to this person. So the first question he would ask was, hey, why are you here? Like, why are you in the dealership? Why are you looking for a new car? Your car looks fine. Like, oh, it's because, my car has no trunk space and I hate the stereo and the gas mileage is horrible. So he's not going to show them the car with the double wishbone suspension. He's not going to talk about the horsepower. He's going to talk about the things that are important to them: the trunk space, the miles per hour or the miles per gallon, and the stereo. And I, till this day, use that strategy on webinars. I ask these questions and address these things in the demos and all that kind of stuff. But I really found that, by pre-selling the software, I learned really quickly. Again, I had a failure with my podcast. Before I launched Webinar Ninja, I had a failed webinar product, which was an info product, how to run a webinar and how to put it together with all these tools. And I realized, we launched this thing, spent 4 months on it. And launch day, we had 2 sales. One of them was a chargeback, so it was not even a real sale. The other one was a sympathy sale from a friend. And from that failure, I realized, people don't want to learn how to do this. They want a tool that does it for them. So that's kind of when we pre-sold Webinar Ninja. I came up with a landing page because I was tinkering with WordPress and running webinars with a half-baked software that I created for myself. And then from there, we pre-sold it, put a landing page together and said, hey, this is the software. This is what it's going to do. This is the problem it's solving. Would you like to buy it? And if you want to buy it, just put down $250 as a deposit and you'll get beta access. And this is 2014, so there's not a lot of options. There was like GoToWebinar, and there's Google Meet basically, but there's no landing page marketing part of it, no email list that gets sent out. There's no way to capture and send replays and all that kind of stuff. So we were more of an all-in-one solution. So through that, we were able to pre-sell the product, and we sold 150 spots the first 48 hours, and then we sold 100 spots. The next, we opened up another 100 spots.
Were you running ads to it or something?
No,
Just
I didn't
all
run any
organic.
ads. Actually, what happened was 6 months before that, we went to a conference called New Media Expo in Vegas. It was kind of the first big entrepreneurial conference that Nicole and I went to. We scraped together very little money that we had to get to Vegas and stayed in a flea bag hotel room and whatever, made it happen. And we met some of our heroes online, met some of the people that are doing incredible things. And I took down all their emails and their Twitter handles and da-da-da-da. And then when it came to launch, I just emailed them and said, hey, I'm launching this thing called Webinar Ninja. This is the landing page. If you think that your audience would benefit from this, would you share it,
Wow.
And
they did it just out of the goodness of their heart. It wasn't like
well, to
their
be
commissions and all
100%
that?
honest, a third of them never replied to me.
Yeah.
Another third said no, which is fine. And the other third said, sure, I'll share it. And added it to their newsletter. Some people put it in their podcasts. Some people tweeted it out. And that was more beneficial to us than them buying the software, getting one sale. So that kind of helped us. I had a small email list at the time, about 5,000 people. And that really showed me, again, I have a product here, just the promise of a product that people are willing to throw their money down on to solve a really painful problem. And I thought, okay, this is something pushing the boulder
So
down
you
the
did
hill.
Kickstarter without Kickstarter.
Exactly. I don't want Kickstarter to take my fees, So that gave us the seed capital to pre-sell it and hire a real developer. And then from there, we reinvested the profits from the first cohort and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
I love that. Thanks for sharing that. So you took that money, you rolled it into getting the developers, getting the prototypes out there. How long did it take you from when you raised the cash to when you're able to deliver the first functioning version?
4.5 months.
Okay.
Yeah. I had a
Was that
beta
lo-
version kind of running. I had no commercial license. I had no way to kind of sell it. It was very raw. And I know those users by name. I know them because I worked with them. I talked to them. We improved it. It wasn't a great, flawless product, but we improved it over time. It was still very new and it was a beta. And then from there, we learned and we improved. And then we sold it as a SaaS product, a monthly kind of fee. And we put it on the cloud, it got on AWS. We learned this, to move off a different streaming software, a little bit more reliable because we started to get bigger and bigger webinars. And so, yeah, we learned through some trips and falls, but we made it happen.
That's very cool. Thanks for sharing that. I want to talk a little bit about what's going on right now with your content and the podcast. And I think that a lot of people in their minds, it's a big fluffy idea. I want to make content and I want to make money off of it. And there's different models. Some people are treating it as if the viewer is their future customer. And for some people, it's the sponsors and the platforms. Now, could you explain a bit how you fall into that arena?
This is a challenging one, especially if you're in the market of business education. I always wanted to build a business so that I can be able to become a better entrepreneur and learn. And I've built several businesses. My biggest one was Webinar Ninja, which got acquired. And it was important for me to have an actual business if I was going to teach business and be credible enough to kind of share those stories and the wins and the losses and all that kind of stuff. So if you're in that space, you need to build a business. Before you start teaching, you got to shape your point of view through experience. If you're in a different genre where you're building content for another product that has something to do with business education, my advice would be you want to make the money outside of the content first, because building content to make money is not a really good winning formula. It's like trying to create a movie to sell tickets, and then you have these kind of Rotten Tomato movies that get forgotten the moment they're released. They're kind of blockbuster popcorn things that don't really do much. So pretend you don't have content for a moment, build your business, make your money that way, enough for you to be able to say, okay, now I can comfortably create content to now accelerate the business through that information, through that repertoire. The reason why I say that is because you don't want to make decisions out of desperation. And your livelihood is reliant on your content. That's going to be a problem. You're going to make some decisions that probably you're going to regret, whether it's from a sponsorship point of view or whatever, choosing wrong partnerships that won't work out in the long term. I also would say that by making sure that you create content for content's sake, you are being true to the craft and understanding that I have a long-term view. I'm not trying to build this for a quick win. When I started the podcast, I had no intention of quitting the podcast in a year or two. I knew it was going to be decades. So having that mindset is like, okay, I have this time to improve. Every time I get up to the mic, I think about how can I improve my intonation? How can I improve my breathing? How can I tighten up my script? How can I deliver this in a better way? Sort of like martial art. Every time you hit the mat, how can I improve my craft? And I love that because I played basketball all my life, and basketball is kind of something that has been like the through line. And that's the mentality of basketball is like, you can't expect to be amazing from day one. You have to kind of build skills upon each other. And the same thing goes with content creation. So I would see content creation as kind of a craft you need to build, just like a great writer, great singer, great tennis player, whatever, and try to separate the revenue, at least initially. Like, don't depend on living on that revenue. Get it from the business first, and then you can monetize with the content leader.
Now, we're in Japan right now. You and your lovely wife, you love traveling.
Love it.
And you're a competitive basketball player.
Yeah.
You also love the snow sports.
Yeah.
Now, and you've also been running a podcast where you haven't missed an episode, 3 episodes a week over a decade. Now, could you tell me a bit about how you balance your time and your focus? Because I think a lot of people would think, hey, that, like, how on earth, like, it's too much. They can't imagine doing all that.
That's a good question. I think that the first thing you need to understand that your time is yours. You need to utilize your most valuable asset that serves you. You need to make some decisions about what's important to you in life. That means you're going to need to make some sacrifices. A lot of people don't realize that, by saying I always say, like, you can have it all, I just can't have it all at once. Like, choose, maybe this is the season of travel, and then the next season is going to be the season of learning, and the next season is going to be a season of family, where I'm going to start a family, or the season, whatever it is, right? So just understand that you need to make some tough choices. One of the exercises that Nicole and I do every year that I absolutely love is something that was introduced to me by Dale Beaumont. Dale Beaumont is a good friend of mine and incredible entrepreneur over there in Australia, Business Blueprint. Love you, Dale. Love you, man. Dale taught me this thing called the preloaded year, which basically you sit down and you fill your next year's calendar. Like, you sit down in November for next year and you fill in all the important things. You prioritize. If you don't put it on the calendar, it's not going to happen. So if you say, I want to go to 3 different new countries this year, okay, when is that going to happen? And when is it a good time? So maybe you put it this month, Okay, what about your business? Do you have any launches going on? Do you have any business team retreats? Put that in the calendar. What about birthdays? You want to work on your birthday? No, I don't want to work on my birthday. So you're being intentional about how you're going to spend the next year in your time. It's an incredible system. It's very empowering too, to be like, now that everything's in the calendar, the next step, book the flights. You already have them in the calendar. You got to do it now, save some money, and book some flights. So it's a great way for you to take ownership of your time, and also a chance for you to make those decisions, what's important. So some people, they might fill their calendar with something totally different. Like, I want to go hiking the Himalayas for 3 months. Okay, then that's something you got to put in your calendar.
Yeah. You're the Taki, our mutual friend, and Dale and you are all talking about the preloaded year. Something I did, I think the first year I was working with Taki, I implemented that. It was great. And then the next year we forgot. We didn't do it since. So good reminder. And I'm gonna do. We're still in February, so we still got time to salvage this year. I want to ask you something about free content, free advice versus getting people to pay you for your expertise. Mm-hmm. Your podcast, you're quite candid, and you share pretty much everything without gatekeeping. But how do you balance that with, for example, somebody who might actually want to pay an expert to, or you potentially, to actually help them in a way that you might not do publicly?
I share everything I have publicly on the podcast. I don't hold back. If somebody asks me a question, I give them the same answer I would if they were consulting with me, and all that kind of stuff. The reason why anybody would pay me for the program or anything else is for brevity. Is that, hey, I don't want to sift through all the different videos. I want to, or podcast episodes. Structure. A lot of people are busy and they don't have time to kind of make their own structure for themselves. And accountability. They need to be held accountable. What's going on today? What's your progress? And milestones of, like, where should I be by now? And that's really what they're paying for. They're not paying for the content, because the content is available anywhere. And not just, I don't have a monopoly on the content. They can get the content from many places in different ways. So what the program does is it allows them to really have that structure, have that accountability, have that path of, like, okay, this is where I'm at. This is where I want to go. How do I get there? Well, here it is in a linear fashion. It makes it simple. And if you resonate with the way I teach and the way I deliver my content, then you'll love that path.
And that makes a lot of sense. And it's kind of like having a really, really good Google search. Instead of, reading the whole book, it's just like you get the highlights, but you get to ask directly. That makes a lot of sense. Now, we just have a couple minutes left. And This is what's great is when you started this conversation, you mentioned something about you're being careful not to give prescriptive instruction, right? And what I like to do ending these is ask the viewer a question that's going to be an unlock for them. And what I like you to do is imagine somebody who's a consultant or coach or in some kind of professional services. They know that content creation, content marketing, podcasting, for example, is something that's going to help them, but for some reason it's not working, or they stopped, which happens to so many people, and they're wondering if it's even worth it. What question could you ask them that is going to help them, by them answering, it's going to give them an unlock?
I think that one of the best questions I asked myself, this is what worked for me, was why should anybody care about my podcast? Why should anybody listen? What makes it any different than any other podcast? What's the value that I provide? So the question I would ask you to ask yourself is, what kind of unique value can you add to your content? And sometimes it's just your story. Sometimes it's just your why. I share my story about my parents immigrating from Egypt to the US, and, we did okay, but they never were abundantly wealthy or anything. And we're very conscious of spending and stress and finances and all that kind of stuff. So my why was like, I don't want anybody to go through that, what I had to go through. I kind of feel bad for my parents. My parents had to endure that kind of feeling of being behind on their promises and behind on achieving their dreams and giving their kids that they wanted. So that's my why. And it's good to share the stories of, like, when I teach on the podcast, this is my perspective. I'm telling you to do this, this is how you should, market on Facebook. And the reason why I'm sharing it this way is because I did the opposite, and this is the story behind it, and this is the things I went through, and this is the problems I faced, and I don't want you to go through that. And it seems a lot more sincere. That's my take, my spin, my story, my reasoning behind it. And people that will resonate with it, be like, okay, I get this person's really has my best interest in mind. They actually care. I think this is something that people don't talk about enough, is that it's important for the person that's watching your video to actually feel like they care about the results you get. When it's just like, hey, here are 5 tips on this, 1, 2, 3, 4, take it or leave it. It's very kind of dry, and it doesn't really connect on an emotional level. I think emotion is very underrated when it comes to content creation. You got to connect with people, and they have to feel like, okay, I understand that this person actually is rooting for me, wants me to win, is actually giving me advice like a consultant, like a friend. Sometimes I joke around, like, don't say Uncle Omar didn't warn you. I told you to do this, But it comes up from a place of, I actually want to see this person win, and I want them to improve. So I would say that ask yourself how you're going to be able to be unique, share your story, share your journey, and people that will resonate with it, and those who don't, they're not your people anyway. So I think that that's something that's good to think about. It's hard in the beginning because a lot of people don't want to open up. A lot of people want to just be like, okay, this is a business and there's a wall and things like that. But those days are over. Like, faceless corporations don't exist or are not successful anymore.
Thank you for that. And if you were to take all that, which I love, and put that into like one question that people are just going to go back and they got to think about an answer. The way I understood it is, what makes your podcast different? Or why would someone listen to my podcast?
Why would they care?
Why would they care?
Yeah.
Why would someone care? I love that. Thank you. And I guess you could get even more specific and put in your ideal customer profile there. Why would a middle-aged mother with 3 children who wants to start a business care?
Right. Exactly. And I like the word care because it reminds you that you have to care. Yeah. And I think a lot of people right now are just trying to work the algorithm, trying to figure out how to get the clicks and the likes and all that kind of stuff, and not realizing who you are as a person matters, and how you show that you're not just doing this to be the algorithm, you're actually doing this to help.
Right, and I appreciate that. Omar, thank you so much for that. Every bit of what you just shared here was, I think it's going to be really interesting for people watching. They're going to be able to use that right away, but also for me personally, because since we've been working together, I've been consuming your content, and I've actually been learning a lot from you as I've been helping develop your online presence. So thank you for that. And for everybody else who's watching, guys, thanks for watching all the way to the end. And if there's any part of this that was valuable to you, then I'd really recommend you check out the links down below to Omar's content. Check him out on YouTube, on Instagram, on podcasts. We'll have all the links down there. And that's it for today's episode, and I'll see you next week.
No hustle, worship here, we're a different breed. Action is what we got if action is what you need. Content capitalists, we're breaking the mold. Cause the old ways fade, new stories to the toe. So content capitalists, get to the prize.